Hello and welcome to another episode of Smaulgld Subscribers Sound Off, the place where we interview Smaulgld subscribers and find out what's on their mind and get some insights that you don't get elsewhere on the alternative financial media. Today I am delighted to have with me Rhefn, and he comes to us from the lovely country of Wales. And before we get started, I'm going to give a chance to introduce himself, and then we're going to talk about gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, central banks, and Austrian economics. How are you today, sir?
Hello, Lewis. Very privileged to be on your show. So, I'm an Austrian economist, and I have an interest more than anything else in money. So, gold, silver, banking, central banking, and cryptocurrencies.
Okay, so one of the things that I want our listeners to know, you and I have been in contact for the past couple of years. I've been reading your blog, and a lot of it is about central banking, how it works, how it doesn't work, and it also covers a lot of information to check out about how cryptocurrencies work. Can you just quickly give us the URL for that for your website?
Yeah, it's Rhefn, which is ANNRHEFN.wordpress.com.
And I'll put a link below. Okay, well let's start it right away. What's on a lot of people's minds right now are what's happening in the gold market, the silver market manipulation, and then in contrast, what's happening in the cryptocurrency markets, where you see the skyrocketing prices and a lot of interest. And one of the things that we see is this rise of Ethereum versus Bitcoin. And a lot of people don't know much about which one is which, and some people just say one is better than the other because one is going up. Can you tell us what's the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum?
The difference. There's so many differences.
Well, maybe you could tell us. Well, I think one of the best ways to look at it, and the way you've described it to me in the past, is what Bitcoin is and what Ethereum is, and then you basically see how they're different.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin was started by, well, to rewind even further, cryptography and this idea of decentralized kind of e-cash goes back really to the 70s with this with the rise of the cypherpunks after governments basically legalized or published work on cryptography. So this previously had been work done by the intelligence services. So you're thinking about Enigma, World War II. So anyway, a couple of books came into the into public in the 1970s, and then you kind of had the rise of these private cryptographers, which are called cypherpunks, and they tried many experiments with trying to decentralize cash, but they all failed. Mostly because of a centralized middleman, as in to run this cash system. So the most recent two before Bitcoin were eGold, and I think the other was called something with cash. Anyway, they were both shut down by the US government, obviously. So well, there is, there's many rumors that Bitcoin was developed by the intelligence services. DARPA had done work on it in the 90s and the 2000s. So it's very possible that Satoshi Nakamoto actually worked for DARPA on some of these projects. But when Bitcoin came out, it was completely decentralized. So that's
and what was
really
the point? And what was the point of Bitcoin, or what is the point of Bitcoin right now?
It's basically it's an asset ledger and currency that doesn't have a centralized issuer.
Okay, so now let's contrast that to what Ethereum is. Is Ethereum a currency?
Well, you could argue that it is. It's a store of value. If you hold ethers, it's gone up from, I don't know, $2 or $8 at the start of the year to nearly 350. So it's definitely a store of value. It's a medium of exchange where people can exchange ethers, and it's a unit of account. So I think, as Vitalik has brought this up himself, those are the main three characteristics of money, and Ethereum have them. So you could call them a currency, but the Ethereum ledger itself is more suited to smart contracts. So this is one difference I would definitely put between Bitcoin and Ethereum, is that Bitcoin is kind of the internet of money, and Ethereum is more geared towards private business and exchange of contracts. So we're kind of talking about money and law.
And that leads us to ICOs. Can you explain how Ethereum is used in these initial coin offerings and why it's used and not Bitcoin?
I would say it's used more than Bitcoin because it's more flexible. So there are some interfaces that have developed on top of Ether that allows companies to do these ICOs, because there's not much work being done on it in the Bitcoin space at the moment, because we're trying to concentrate on what I would call more important things, which is making it secure and trying to scale it as well as we can as a medium of exchange for now. And that's based on its inherent limitations, which you can have a secure blockchain or you can have a flexible blockchain, but there's a trade-off between the two. If you want security, you can't have much flexibility, and if you want a lot of flexibility, you have to trade off on your security.
So is it correct to say, that maybe you can give me an example of a security issue on Ethereum, that Bitcoin has not had any security issues other than the hacking of the exchange, but Ethereum has had one very high profile issue? Can you let our listeners know what that was?
Well, that was the DAO, which is the decentralized autonomous organization, and where I actually believe that is Ethereum's killer app in the long term, which is to develop a system of smart contracts between businesses that can, well, revolutionize the modern corporation.
And what happened with that?
Very clever and a bit of an arsehole. He somehow found a problem in Ethereum's code, and he used that to in the DAO's code, which was on the Ethereum blockchain, and he used it to siphon roughly 50 million, and that's at that time in Ether, from Ether users. So what you had was basically a hack and a theft of $50 million worth of Ether, and I think at the time that was about a third of the worth of Ether at that time. So you have a choice, as if you put yourself in Vitalik's brain, you have a choice. You can either not do anything and your customers lose, the DAO investors lose 50 million, and then they probably phone up the SEC. You get arrested and put in jail, or you could hard fork Ethereum, which is to basically reverse the hack to get those user funds back, but Ethereum can never be truly immutable from then on, and why this is the reason why Ethereum Classic exists.
Well, what did they do when they were faced with those two choices?
He hard forked the net. He basically, in a couple of days, he convinced the Ethereum community to hard fork and basically go back.
So doesn't that go against, that goes against, and I want to get your view on this, the concept that many in the crypto community subscribe to, is that code is law. In this case, there was human intervention. What do you make of that, and what are the consequences of abandoning code for law and going for human intervention?
Well, this is the question. It's do you want an immutable blockchain, or do you want your blockchain to be able to be reversed or bailed out somehow? This is like what happened to the banks in 2008. Mm-hmm. Do you let them collapse, or do you prop them up and bail them out? And this is what Ethereum decided to do. So Ethereum, because it's a flexible network, he has the trade-off on the security. So what they did was they basically sold out all security to bail out users.
Now, when that happens, and this is the philosophical question, but it also leads into valuation. One would think that when a central bank or a crypto community decide to intervene and basically reverse what they consider a bad outcome, you would think that confidence in the system is lost because of the human intervention. However, some might say that that intervention itself provides confidence. I want to get your thoughts on that, because what we've seen since 2008, they interfered, the central banks interfered in the system, and we had this massive stock market boom. We haven't seen an economic boom. And when we have the interference with Ethereum in 2016, I believe it was over a year ago, the Dow incident. Yeah. Since then, Ethereum still has this confidence, and the price has risen, and people are doing ICOs on top of it. Is that because they think that they'll interfere again if there's an issue with their ICOs?
Vitalik's obviously a very smart guy, and he's the talisman of Ethereum. So whatever Vitalik says, the community kind of agrees with. So if Vitalik says there's no problem with hard forking, to most of the Ethereum community, they just take his word as gospel.
Can I interrupt? Is that akin to what the central banks say when the Fed says something?
Yeah. Yeah. As central banking is a confidence game, so is Ethereum, or has been since the DAO hack, in my opinion.
That's a very good insight, because what we've seen, or at least what I've seen, and it's stunning to me because you and I are both on the Austrian School of Economics, where we think that free markets eventually provide the best and the correct result. We've seen massive intervention, and it gets rewarded. And you would think that this type of intervention would have unintended consequences that would be disastrous. So far, we haven't had the disaster. Do you foresee a disaster both in central bank intervention and also in Ethereum intervention?
I do, for both, because you can hard fork, or you can bail out, or whatever you want to call it. You basically just kick the can down the road. So, for example, with Ethereum, Vitalik bailed out a $50 million mistake, and now it's a $35 billion blockchain. And but in my opinion, when it gets hacked the next time, the $50 million problem he buckled under with the DAO is all of a sudden a $35 billion problem. And if the SEC wouldn't come after him for 50 million, I have a funny feeling they're going to come after him for 35 billion.
But isn't the bigger issue not what the SEC does, but what that would do to the confidence of the Ethereum blockchain and its utility for doing deals and doing ICOs?
That's true, but you know, it's been a year since DAO and Ethereum's still here, so it's like John Maynard Keynes's line, the market can remain irrational
Right.
a lot longer than you can remain solvent.
Yeah, well, let's move on now to Bitcoin versus Litecoin. I think there it's a lot easier to explain the differences. Can you give the listeners what the difference between Bitcoin and Litecoin is, and where you see the next few months headed? Because there's some important milestones that are going to be hit for both coins.
Yeah, well, Litecoin was developed by Charlie Lee, who's a former Google engineer. I think it was in 2014, so I think Bitcoin has 5 years on Litecoin. It's, I think, the second oldest coin. Charlie is, well, I like Charlie very much. I think he's very clued up. It was a pretty honest launch, so no pre-mine, and the miners have been running Litecoin mining for the last 4 years. So it was basically a fork of Bitcoin. So Charlie forked off the base code of the Bitcoin, and then he tweaked some things on it. So, for example, Bitcoin confirms transaction blocks every 10 minutes, and Litecoin confirms block transactions every 2.5 minutes. So it's 4 times faster, but it also has 4 times the rate of issue, which Bitcoin has 25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes, and Litecoin, I think, is 100 every 10 minutes.
So what's...
it's 4 times as quick, and it has 4 times the rate of inflation. Everything's basically a 4-to-1 with Litecoin to Bitcoin.
Right, and I think that the total number of Litecoins to be issued is 4 times the amount of the coins that Bitcoin
84 million Litecoins, and I think they mined something like 59 or something like that.
Right. So what happens with Litecoin versus Bitcoin if the two are very similar? Why does one have a market capitalization 20, 30 times more than Litecoin, even though the ratio is 4-to-1?
Well, Bitcoin has a 5-year head start. It has maybe 100, 110, maybe 150 lead developers, which are, solid developers working on Bitcoin. Litecoin may have, I don't know. It might have gone up lately, but they have about 10 maybe. Bitcoin has numerous interfaces such as mobile wallets, laptop wallets, all that kind of user interface that Litecoin just doesn't have at the moment.
So it's an infrastructure issue as well. So that highlights that even though that Bitcoin is open source, it's not like anyone can just do it.
No, but you can. What Bitcoin does, it gives you all the work has been done on Bitcoin, which means you can more quickly shift it to other coins. But still, you still need the expertise and the people to do that. And most developers still prefer to work on Bitcoin because it's the biggest, the most established, the most secure. So even though you think that Litecoin has a lot of advantages over Bitcoin, it depends on more than just the ledger itself.
So do you think Litecoin is life?
Bitcoin is life. No. Okay. No, I think Litecoin's a good complement to Bitcoin. Like I said, Charlie's he's an honest guy. I actually really like Litecoin, and I've held Litecoin. I bought my first in, I think it was 2013 at $1.50.
Oh, that's a good, good gain. Well, a lot of people they consider Litecoin silver to Bitcoin. I think that's what why he invented it. Litecoin is meant to be the little sister or little brother to Bitcoin, silver to gold.
I think what Charlie saw was that Bitcoin would have scaling problems because of its block size.
Well, let's talk
and
about that
it's,
quickly
yeah,
because we are having that issue where they're saying now that Litecoin transactions are faster, are cheaper than Bitcoin at the moment. Is that going to get sorted out? Can you tell the viewers, we don't have viewers, we have listeners, about a segregated witness? Because I think that's people talk about segwit and they don't really know what it means.
yeah, sure. So there's been this ongoing debate about the block size for forever. There were two proposed forks, I think, in 2015 and 2016. That was Bitcoin XT and Bitcoin Classic. So these were kind of projects by developers who wanted a bigger block size. So they tried to convince the community to upgrade to these forks, and nobody bought it. So these people like Gavin Andresen and Mike Hearn have basically been sidelined. Because it's really not easy to take over Bitcoin with your ideas. So the core developer solution to SegWit, to the block size problem, is segregated witness. So this was originally developed as a fix for transaction malleability, which has been scapegoated as the cause of hacks on some exchanges. And malleability is it's a problem in cryptography generally, which means that people can do DDoS attacks, and it's basically jam and scam up the works. So segregated witness, what it does is it because it takes the transaction out of the block, it kind of fixes transaction malleability, and transactions can take up to 75% of a block size. So taking the transactions out automatically gives you, they reckon, between 2 and 2.5 times the capacity that it was before.
Now, hasn't Litecoin undergone that, I think, back in April?
Yeah, Litecoin has undergone this too. So Litecoin, even though it doesn't have scaling issues at the moment, it's really upgraded the Litecoin, so it's going to hit scaling a lot later than it has on Bitcoin.
And what is Bitcoin's plan to address this issue?
Well, if you've read my last couple of posts, this has been ongoing for a while. Bitcoin Unlimited was this kind of the new fork, which was Bitcoin XT and Bitcoin Classic. Bitcoin Unlimited is the most recent proposal, cheerleaded by Roger Ver and Jihan Wu of Bitmain, which has, again, as the other two, failed to gain any traction. But because the miners get to signal for this activation of SegWit, they've been stalling for months and months, which is why we have got to the situation of the user-activated soft fork, which I predicted in my Bitcoin scaling post as the end game theoretical for this scaling debate. So what the users have done is basically exerted leverage, and so the users, Bitcoin users, can upgrade to SegWit code and activate SegWit without the mining community, which is this would be the first time. So it's quite a big development, actually.
All right, well, let's move now from cryptocurrencies to...
hold on, can I just...
absolutely, it's your
just
show.
finish
Go
off
ahead.
So, by taking this out of the hands of the miners, because the miners they've been able to signal for SegWit for the last year, but they decided not to, for the reason that they don't want SegWit to activate because they'll lose a heavy portion of the fees they make. So,
and that's because it requires more computing power, and therefore the price to verify a transaction is higher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so what the miners, what the users are doing with this UASF is basically using as leverage to force the miners to activate SegWit by miner activated soft fork. So you've had all the talk of SegWit 2x and all this stuff in the last few weeks. So apparently it looks now as if they are going to activate SegWit by miner activated soft fork before the 1st of August, and then within the next 6 months are going to come up with a code to activate a doubling of the block size to 2 megabytes, which I argue will never happen. So what the end game of this UASF, what it's really done is get the miners to activate SegWit, and then I reckon the rest of the community will just dump the 2x plan.
Okay. Now, Bitcoin versus gold. There's a lot of people who are in one camp or the other. You happen to be one who's in both camps, and I put myself in both, and I see, as you do, the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. Can you give us your view on what uses and value you see in Bitcoin and how it complements the uses and values you see in gold?
As far as I'm concerned, gold is physical and Bitcoin is digital, and I think that's the only real difference I see between them. I think they are both stores of value, and to a lesser extent at the moment, mediums of exchange. But the difference between the two, gold's 6,000 years old and Bitcoin's 8 years old. So to a lot of gold bugs, they look at Bitcoin and go, no. But in terms of money and how you look at money, I see them very similar investments.
And how do you think central banks view each of these? Both their view towards gold and their view towards cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin.
Central banks' worst nightmare is gold, because gold is money. So what they have to do is brainwash the population to lose their love of gold, which they have done over the last 100 years. Mm-hmm. So first you have gold as the basis of the banking system, and then you have a paper derivative layer on top which scales it as a medium of exchange, which was paper money.
Right.
Then banks kind of consolidate and get taken over and centralized by crime dynasties, and then eventually comes a central bank, which is a layer on top of the traditional banking system, and then gold kind of gets lost in the noise as money, and it comes subordinate to central bank credit, which is then issued to the banks, which then issue loans based off of that credit. So what the central banks will then do over time is demonize gold. They came off the gold standard in 1914 or 15. Then they will try and remove gold from circulation in the population, which they did in the 1930s with what was his name?
Franklin Roosevelt.
Evil man, yeah, Franklin Roosevelt. And I think Churchill did the same in the UK in the 1930s. So once gold is effectively out of circulation, then this paper money takes over. I think they then took silver out of circulation. Was it in the 60s in the US? I know that there are
1964 was the last year of silver coinage in the US, and then Canada, UK, France, all in the 60s got rid of their silver coins.
Right. So by the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement and the Nixon shock of 1971, most precious metals were out of circulation, and then we were just on a pure paper money standard. Ever since, and then once you're off a gold standard, then you can print as much money as you can and create as much degeneracy and misery and poverty as you want.
Now, given that, you said that gold is the #1 enemy of the central banks. However, one of the things that I've noticed in the last year and been reporting on is that central banks, or at least the Western central banks, hardly ever even mention gold. But they have been talking up a storm about cryptocurrencies. And most recently, the head of the German Bundesbank is talking about how central banks might fight cryptocurrencies by creating their own. Can you talk to us a bit about how cryptocurrencies pose a threat to central banks?
Well, central banks can control gold through derivatives market because fiat money is used in 99.9% of all everyday life. They can get a hold of gold and silver and then manipulate them through paper derivatives, which they are doing on the COMEX and in the LBMA in London. Cryptocurrencies are only 8 years old and they came out of nowhere. So, as gold has always been the kryptonite of the banking system, cryptocurrencies are only an 8-year-old kryptonite, which I don't know if I'm not sure here how much central banks actually understand it. If you listen to the public words, I don't think they have a clue about it, but I don't think they are that stupid myself. So the reason why cryptocurrencies are more of a threat to them is because they haven't been able to figure out a way to manipulate them yet.
Okay,
so we'll see.
I want to talk about the differences between gold and silver. You say gold is kryptonite to the banking system. There are some that believe that silver, in fact, is. Do you have an opinion on the differences between gold and silver? Silver is money, silver as a threat. What's your view on silver?
Silver is always, should always trade at a discount to gold due to the scarcity in the earth. So, historically, I think central banks had more interest in gold and that silver was more money of the people. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think silver is held by many central banks. Am I right?
I don't think there's one that does. I know India had some reserves a few years back, but I think governments hold them as strategic stockpiles, some governments, but that's different than it being part of the monetary system in central banks.
So in my opinion, I'm far more bullish on silver than gold because central banks hold gold. People like Rothschilds and them, they hold gold. Silver is more, well, they just don't hold reserves of it. So I think yeah, go on.
I'm trying to figure this out because one argument for the price of gold being higher than silver on a relative basis is that you have somewhat of a floor on the gold demand because central banks hoard it and accumulate it, whereas they don't with silver. So explain why that would enter into your pricing mechanism, your valuation model.
Well, I just take it that, the price of everything these days is rigged. So I think
that's true.
So I think central banks have far more of a collar on gold than they do on silver. So I just think historically that silver has been more a medium of exchange and gold a store of value.
So let's talk about then cryptocurrencies backed by gold and silver. They don't seem to have taken off in the same way with the same enthusiasm as, I guess, what you call pure cryptocurrencies. Why is that?
I think it's early on in the game, to be honest with you. I've there's I think Gold Money runs cryptocurrency gold exchange, and RTRO is another one in Berlin that runs. So that's two I hear of the Royal Mint planning a gold-backed cryptocurrency, but that's kind of a company cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I say, you can have any size blockchain you want. You could have just a pure gold-backed blockchain, or with Bitcoin, you could back any commodity on the blockchain.
Right, but when you take a cryptocurrency or you take a commodity and you use it as backing for a cryptocurrency, aren't you still tied to the price of what's backed, meaning the gold or the oil, and that's based on the market that can be manipulated, whereas a pure cryptocurrency currently can't be.
Yeah, that's true, but that's in the short term. That you basically assume that central banks will keep control of every commodity manipulation
Right.
for the rest of history.
So my question is, no, I agree. Okay, so my question is though, if you have a gold-backed cryptocurrency, what value today do you have than just having the gold stored somewhere?
What it does is it scales it as a medium of exchange. I wrote a post on this nearly 2 years ago, Gold on the Blockchain, the distributed gold standard on steroids. So
we'll put a link to that below this YouTube.
Yeah,
well.
you can hold gold in physical form, and to do that, all you need to do is hold it at home or dig a hole in the back garden or whatever. But if you want to spend that gold, and the only reason we produce is to eventually consume, you can hold a small portion of your gold in digital form on a blockchain, on Bitcoin or in any gold-backed cryptocurrency, and then it just gives you, it just basically scales gold more as a medium of exchange.
So that in itself gives the gold more value because it's spendable now in a form where otherwise you have to go in the backyard, dig it up.
Say you put 10 billion pound of gold on Bitcoin. You've got that 10 billion of gold, but that also adds 10 billion to the value of Bitcoin as well. So you're kind of backing Bitcoin with physical reserves of gold, and this can apply to any commodity: silver, zinc, iron ore, anything. The blockchain scales anything basically as a medium of exchange eventually. So if you have a centralized blockchain, say like the Royal Mint have developed, then I would assume that they would scale transactions at near zero, because it's a centralized database. I would assume.
I have a question. One of the things about a gold standard, anytime you deal with a physical commodity, there's the issue of trust. Does GLD, the EFT, have all that gold? Does the United States have all that gold they say they have? How does the blockchain deal with audit issues to make sure that when you have crypto gold that you actually have that gold?
What you need is, obviously, you still need an element of trust. If you hold Bitcoin on your blockchain, there's no issue of trust because you're holding a digital asset that is not controllable by a central bank or a government. If you're holding gold in digital form, obviously the underlying needs to be secured and audited. So this basically then comes down to the free market and who are the most honest exchanges and who you trust and how transparent their storage and auditing are.
Well, that's one of the examples that I like to raise, is that one of the differences between cryptocurrencies and other types of free market innovations is that cryptocurrencies don't rely on human trust. We talked about earlier, code is law, but in normal capitalism, you have someone or an issuer or a corporation or a person who's responsible, and it requires trust. Do you see the world heading towards maybe the elimination of human trust, because isn't that what this deal, the smart contract is all about, is that basically the code is the law and human intervention is not required because that doesn't match what's supposed to happen. That's what people want to change things, want to do bailouts. Where do you see the world heading with this? Is the final question is, do you see the world moving to a trustless society where they trust more in the math, the cryptology, and the code than they do in human judgment?
Yeah, I think that's inevitable. I think the mess that these governments and central bankers are made of, money, but what we work for, what we save, and what we use to pay for the stuff we need, it's all centrally controlled, and it's just destroying society. So I think it's inevitable that we're going to go to a trustless system. It doesn't necessarily have to be Bitcoin or just one cryptocurrency. It can be spread over hundreds, thousands of cryptocurrencies, all working to their own economies of scale.
Very interesting. And last question, how long do you think it'll be until that is A, apparent, and B, perhaps complete?
Well, in my last post I've written, I said that we are nearing recession and will probably be in recession by the end of 2017 or the first half of 2018. So a recession will precipitate defaults, liquidations, will blow massive holes in bank balance sheets, governmental taxation shakedowns will really suffer. So I think that will lead to an increasing loss of trust in banks and governments, which will feed into cryptocurrency's price, driving them up. So you've got a kind of a loss in trust in one system and increasing trust in another system. So I've always thought that things might collapse overnight, but the closer we get to this kind of tipping point now, is I see more of a transitional period than going from one system to the other overnight. But I think it's going to be driven by normal people.
Okay.
They will. And I could just add, there's another post I've written on Bitcoin demographic adoption, which posits that it will be the millennials that will drive Bitcoin adoption, because the boomers, they're the generation of bank accounts and television, whereas the millennials are more tech savvy, for example, with laptops and mobile phones that can scale Bitcoin. So I think that the millennials will drive this new decentralized monetary system.
All right. Well, what we're going to do, and if you're amenable to it, we'll have you on in a few months to see how this is progressing. How's that sound?
Yep. Anytime, Lewis. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.